I decided to make a short video today showing you some of the improvements I made to my Harbor Freight motorcycle lift. I bought this one a couple years ago for $2.99 in the fall, as they quite often go on sale in the fall. I haven't been particularly happy with it, especially the pump, the foot pump. It goes up kind of slow, and because I suffer with a small knee issue, sometimes pumping up the heavier bikes becomes a problem. I decided to make it a pneumatic lift. I went back to Harbor Freight, and for $189 I bought a 12-ton air jack. I sat down with a piece of paper and a pencil, and I created a design that I hoped would work. Here's what I came up with. The original foot pump handle was located on the other side. It was connected to a solid shaft that bolted right here, went all the way across. I decided to repurpose that shaft down under the bottom of my jack. I drilled 2 holes in the frame. I welded it to a 1/8 inch piece of steel plating, which I bolted to the bottom of the jack. I did this because the jack is cast iron, and sometimes welding to cast iron can be tricky. The end of the jack had a slightly smaller diameter where the foot pedal used to mount on. I put in a steel bushing. I ran it to the outside and tack welded it to the frame. The shaft is still free, and I can pound it out at any time if I should need to service the jack in the future. The next issue was the jack itself. Harbor Freight jacks came with a black steel plate and 2 recoil springs from which to draw the jack back down. I thought it looked kind of cumbersome and kind of took away from the original design of the lift. So I took a 1-inch piece of straight steel stock and welded it on this tab and added one of the springs back on. It seems to draw back just fine. The next issue was the shaft itself. Right in here was a screw-up extension, and it fit into this piece okay, but it fit loosely and it didn't go all the way in. When I tried to run the jack up and down, it snapped and popped, and it wasn't a smooth action. So my remedy was to snip this off with a plasma cutter, and I put that piece into a lathe and turned it out just enough inside so that it fits snug on the end of the original shaft. Now the whole thing fits in tightly and has a nice smooth action. Some of the people online that I noticed, they did it differently, and their jacks were hitting the floor. That caused them to have to replace these wheels with larger wheels. Because I used this shaft design, mine aligns itself, and I did not have to replace my original wheels. I'll go around to the other side and we'll talk about the release. A lot of the videos I watched, out of all the videos I watched, no one seemed to reuse the original release mechanism. I reused the whole thing. There's my foot pedal. There's my original mechanism. The issue I noticed everyone was having was that this shaft didn't quite reach the jack. Well, I looked out here and realized this part of the shaft stuck out a ways with a C-clip. I removed the C-clip and tapped that in just far enough to reach the jack. I then took my hand grinder and I made a groove right in here, just wide enough to fit right on that set screw. So now it works as it should. The jack already had a swivel action in it. The mechanism had a swivel action in it, so everything seems to work as it should. The spring was a little bit longer. I did shorten it. I put a little bit shorter spring on to give it a little more tension. I will come up here now and say I added a hand crank wheel chock to the front. This is what Harbor Freight shipped it with. I thought it was kind of cheesy. I didn't think it worked very well. I went on eBay a couple years ago and I bought this hand crank wheel chock. It works really great. I wheel the bike on. I hold the handlebar with my right hand. I snug up the crank with my left hand, and that makes it fit nice and snug, long enough for me to get my straps on here on the side. I don't remember who sold it to me, but I know you can still find them online. I'll move to the back. The next issue I saw people talking about was the rear plate that drops out when you change the rear tire. Some people are complaining that underweight, the back of the plate popped up and sometimes would shoot right off the lift when they were driving up onto it. My remedy for that was another piece of 1-inch steel stock. I welded a piece right on here. That created a nice tight groove right there. My plate slides right into it and then drops right into the hole. No need for any of them unnecessary bolts and screws that I saw people installing on their lifts. Another really cool feature I added to this lift was this scissor jack. I went on to Amazon for $49 to $59. I bought this scissor jack. That affords me to pick the bike up nice and level. Stays nice and solid when I need to unattach my front cables and remove my front tire. If I want to work on the bike for any reason with no straps, this will hold it in place just fine. I'll come back around to this side and we'll see how it works. I'll go ahead and pull out my load bearing shaft. Before we let it down, I'll mention I did add this foot valve. The jack came with a hand valve. I didn't want to have to reach to the floor every time to pick it up. So I went on Amazon and I picked up this foot valve for $18. It has a slight leak in it, but I'm really not that worried about it. I'm not going to send it back as I won't be using it that often. I also bought this 4-foot air hose from Amazon, which allowed me to bring it back to the back of the lift. I drilled a hole, added in my air supply, and I just attached my hose back here, keeping it up where I can reach it. I will now get down. I'm going to use my foot pedal with my hand so I can stay back further away so you can watch the action. It drops down nice and slow. I can control it at just about any speed I want. You can see it has a nice slow action. I can go faster or slower if I need to. There. Now I'll mention before I blow it back up, I shut my compressor off so you wouldn't have to hear it. So I'm going to try to pump this back up with the air that's remaining in my tank, and I don't have a very large compressor. I think this jack requires between 100 and 120 psi. It comes up slow, but it's really strong. I think 12 tons is all we need because no matter what size jack I put under there, it's still only rated for 1,000 pounds. I might add, by placing the jack in the location I did, I can still, if I needed to, slide my hand wrench underneath. I can still access the hand pump underneath. If anything should go wrong with the air, I can still jack it manually. I'm going to go ahead and reinsert my load bearing bar. Just let the weight go back down on that, so it doesn't all set directly on my jack. The only thing I might add is Harbor Freight had a display model that had a much smaller actuator than this. It was also much louder in operation. This is their latest model. They've put a slightly larger air actuator on it, and it has an air muffler on the back, which makes it so much quieter. If you were to try this, I would look for the later model. This is my design. It worked good for me. I think it would work good for you. Good luck and thanks for watching.